Hello and welcome everyone to Take Your Time, a Persona 5 Royal in real-time podcast where myself, Jonathan Dornbush, and my good friend Tom Marks play through Persona 5 Royal in real time according to the in-game time calendar that keeps time for the game you're playing so that the time we take is in realistic time to the days that pass in our lives.
That's going to escalate to the point where it's just like the first 5 minutes of the show.
Yeah, it's just the show. And anyway, thank you so much for joining us for this week. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time. But no, of course, we're here to talk this week about June 7th through June 13th. We are out of the Madarame sort of section of the game. And while we get a little bit of a tease for where things are going to go, this week is a lot more, I think, about building up some important characters outside of the Phantom Thieves that we know. And laying the groundwork for where those characters are going to come into things. But it's also a time as with the first palace to kind of reflect and take your time to reflect fondly on the memories of changing someone's heart. Of course, though, before we get to all of that, Tom, you have a pop quiz answer for us.
I do. So last week, Morgana, I was asked about Morgana having this kind of midlife crisis moment of like, am I evil after the palace? And Morgana says, there's no way a dashing, honorable rogue like me could be evil, a man who saves those in trouble in the West while punishing evildoers who may lurk in the East, a man who chastises people that smoke inside in the South. And I asked, what does this ideal man that Morgana is talking about do in the North? And the answer is a man who chastises people that smoke inside in the South while saving bullied cats in the North.
Of course.
And then he also ends it with a man who has a sturdy body and vows to always do one good deed a day, be it rain or shine. Just like such a weird little thing, but I really enjoyed that.
The one good deed a day makes sense. The saving cats bit feels a little on the nose.
I just love that, like, the first two are so... This always stuck out to me because it's, like, the first two are, like, saving people and punishing evildoers, and the next two are, like, chastising people who smoke inside and saving cats.
Yeah. It really runs the gamut of social and political, like, socio-political niceties, really. Yeah. But that's kind of what you expect from Morgana sometimes. But yes, thank you for that answer. I completely had forgotten what it was. So as always, Morgana continues to pay dividends with what they have to say. Moving on from there, though, did have a few viewer comments that we wanted to follow up on, a few topics from the past few weeks. One of them being about cards, which Tom and I both talked about how we didn't really use them when we've played Persona, though I have thought about maybe trying to use them a little bit more just to engage with the mechanic this time around. But Josh wrote in on the YouTube version and said, regarding Persona skill cards, I use them a lot on New Game Plus to make powerful Persona builds. Because it's mostly impossible to get all the desired skills onto a Persona through fusion alone, plus once you have the electric chair and lots of money, getting specific skill cards gets much easier. And yeah, I guess in the way of like a thing that I don't engage with in Pokemon of like the perfect breeding sort of scenario of it. I guess if you're trying to really get perfect personas, the cards do have it makes sense that they would be very useful there.
Yeah, and I think the key thing there, because that makes a lot of sense to me. The key thing there is that the difference between Pokemon and Persona, there are many, but one of the main differences
is the only
like
difference.
You can't really realistically level a Persona up with you through the whole game because they stop getting skills, they start getting astronomical amounts of experience between levels, right? It just doesn't make sense to try to even want to do that.
Yeah.
And so the New Game Plus thing actually makes a ton of sense to me, and it's not something I'd considered, just because since you have your whole catalog of Personas, right, with New Game Plus, I believe, it means that you're not going to be, like, running through them as quickly as you do. You have all the money you need to just like buy a later one and kind of tweak it to use longer term.
Yeah.
And you can sort of, like you said, you build your team a little bit more nuanced rather than the base game where you're just sort of going with the flow a little bit more. Obviously you can control that to a certain extent, but you're a little bit more tied to what's in what kind of level tier.
Yeah, the Persona are a little bit more disposable, or like the turnaround on them is more frequent because you are, as you were saying, like you're just trying to adapt to what the next palace is throwing at you, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Josh, for writing in with that. And in terms of the unsigned mug, which we both were talking about last week, one of the items from the palace that you could pick up, we both were like, I don't know why it would be unsigned and why that matters. Turns out it's an art thing. Two viewers wrote in that definitely want to read their comments. Martin said, I think the unsigned mug means it's unmarked, i.e. in the pottery world, a maker's mark would be common on more expensive collectible pieces. So if it's unsigned, it's probably not worth as much because you can't prove that piece's provenance. And Sasha said, as someone who used to be more active in the art world, I think the implication of unsigned mug is more like the artist didn't put their mark or attribution on it. So you can't prove who made it. It's not that it's not autographed by the artist.
Those are both really illuminating, because that also makes me, again, let's just lean into this. It also makes me think of Pokemon, right? Where Pokemon has that teapot Pokemon.
Tom and his Pokemon.
Can sometimes have like a little like symbol mark on the bottom, and if you don't have it, it's a forgery, right?
Right.
And that makes a lot more sense to me. It's not that it's like his signature. It's literally like, it means it's a knockoff mug, basically, which fits in with Madarame's style. It's like, it's just some random, like, unimportant, it's not like an actual nice piece that he made. And that fits in with other things like, the crappy paintings and that sort of stuff. So totally. Thank you both, Martin and Sasha, for that insight as well. Yeah. People helping us here this week.
It's really great. I think the lesson here is stay in school so you can tell idiots on the internet the real facts that they don't know. And before we do finish up, though, there was one response for the quiz. Tom, I don't know if you want to read this one as our quiz master of these, but DJ wrote in.
Yeah, DJ wrote in and said, does Morgana say something about comforting the ladies in the north? Which I thought was probably a pretty good guess.
Yes.
Not right, but like, yeah, that's on brand.
Yeah, that's very much a Morgana way to, but he would say it like in a way that makes him sound like he's trying to be chivalrous about it.
Sure.
But yeah. And then anyway, DJ also said, anyways, love listening to this on Spotify during work. I had recently started a second playthrough, and you guys got me to continue playing and to play alongside both of you. Well, we hope you're enjoying the journey, and as we've said in weeks past, if you end up just wanting to keep playing, don't let us stop you. Keep going through it and enjoy it at the pace you want to. But
take your time, not take our time.
We don't have any more time. We're out of it. It's out of time. No, we have plenty of time to talk about the week of June 7th to June 13th. God damn it, I was so close to it being a smooth transition. Anyway, we're talking about this week. Let's just restart the podcast. It's fine. We'll just get rid of the last 15 minutes. No, we are going to jump in and talk about June 7th through June 13th. It's a little bit of a mix of free time and story beats. So we're going to try to give what we feel is most important for the ongoing story. It's time, but so if we don't touch on every little moment, but there's something that stood out to you, please be sure to leave that in the comments so we can catch up on it next week as well. But
also,
yes,
do we want to mention spoilery stuff?
We can mention that here, yes. We will be talking a little bit about some spoilers toward the end of the show. We will give proper warning then as well, but just ahead of time, just so you know, there will be some spoiler talk toward the end of this episode.
We're going to quarantine it.
Yes, we're with the context of people who have beaten the game. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want to listen to that, shut off the show a little bit later in. But it'll be fine. We'll make sure to give you time to do that on your own. In case you're in the car and you can't stop because you're not at a light and you can't get the button to stop it. I've been there. No, I haven't. I don't know how to drive. I don't have a license. I don't know why I lied to you. I apologize. Anyway, moving on to June 7th.
And real quick too, just one more caveat with that. It's people who've beaten the base game.
Yes.
Because Jonathan still hasn't beaten Royal, so we're not doing any spoilers for that.
Exactly. I couldn't spoil it for you even if I tried.
Yeah.
Or maybe I can. Who knows? That would be a fun thing for me to guess spoilers. Anyway, moving on to the beginning of the week. It's the first 2 days I'm going to kind of take in sort of a look at both of them. Oh, and one of my lights just went out, so isn't this exciting? Oh, it's going to be flashing on and off. This is fun. I'm going to turn it off.
Let's just use it as red light, green light for the entire show. If it's off, you got to stop talking.
The show is like 3 hours long, but half of it's silence.
Yeah.
Anyway, The first 2 days, we're sort of getting a sense of things going on at the school. Obviously, the principal is still trying to investigate what's going on with these changes of heart with Kamoshida, especially in the wake of Madarame, and is obviously trying to get Makoto, who's been on the case, very directly to try to get her to figure out what is going on with some students. And in fact, on June 7th, we find out the principal is just putting up posters telling kids to go to Makoto with their problems without letting her know, which is just wild.
Yeah, super messed up.
Yeah, I can't fathom anyone from any of my schools ever doing that. Like, my God, what a terrible principal. Just also to be like, hey, you student, do all this work for me, and then I'm just going to make it even worse for you without telling you. So he's been putting up these posters, and Makoto starts to get some scary reports about things, but probably not what the principal is looking out for.
Yeah, it's like kids being threatened by mafia people, basically, like being extorted. And these first 2 days kind of run together a little bit. They're just mostly free time. But like, yeah, it's basically just this sort of, you start to see a rift growing further between Makoto and the principal with this.
Yeah, which is, obviously we were first sort of presented Makoto as like very much antagonistic to the group, very much really against what they may be doing, and we start to see at least a little bit of the idea that like maybe the adults that she has aligned herself with are not acting in her best interest or really the best interest of the students. But yeah, it's mafia getting involved in a school, not a great look, not the best of things. So an interesting twist to what we see going on. Between both of these days, too, I'm just going to go through the story, and then we can go through free time if that works for you.
Sure.
We do have 2 quiz questions, one about crabs and one about totalitarianism. The 2 main subjects of school.
Yeah.
Was the crabs one, forgive me, was that the legs? Like, how many legs?
Yeah, it was how many legs does snow, like, or I can't remember specifically what it was. It was like why king crabs, like, are different from snow crabs, and it's like one has 8 pairs of legs, or 5 pairs of legs, and one has 4.
A main subject you should be learning in high school regardless. And then the next day is about totalitarianism, but you know what? Like, I'm more interested in the crabs.
Yeah, this is Maruki, right? Maruki doing another one of those moments, although I guess you haven't seen many of these.
Or did I hang out with him this week?
Oh!
I did.
Anyway. Yay! But Maruki doing another one of these moments where, he's talking about, like, brain stuff, like changing people, like, oppressing people's voices, but, like, and it's stuff kind of related to what you're doing, but not really. Like, it's funny how they make him kind of run parallel throughout these things.
For sure. And on that second day, we get a little bit of a continuation of things related to Makoto. One of them being that on over here, some kids talking about the principal and the rumors that he knew about the sexual harassment that was going on with Kamoshida, and also that he is using Makoto to, do his dirty work, basically, but that she also knew is what the kids have heard. And then we see more of Makoto meeting with the principal, and she's obviously really upset about his postings. Nothing's come of the information he wants. And, she's talking about kids being under threat from a criminal organization, but he doesn't really care. He's more just interested in finding out what's going on with the thing he cares about.
Right. He wanted tips on the Phantom Thieves, and instead he got real problems. And Makoto was like, we got to help these kids. And he's like, yeah, you do that.
Yeah, do that on your own time. I have more important things to worry about. Adults, they suck. Is kind of the message here. But yeah, we do... He sucks. The principal sucks. But yeah, we also get a little free time in these 2 days. So Tom, what did you do starting on the 7th and then the 8th?
The 7th I actually studied because I had not done that yet, and it was raining, and I was just I'm focusing charm and a little bit kind of secondarily guts right now in terms of what I want to expand, but it just felt like a fine day to do that for the first time, and I could get a little guts up from it, and so I studied the first day. And then in the evening, I leveled Mishima to, I believe, level 4.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah.
I studied as well because it was raining. I went to the cafe to study, so I got some guts from that as well, because my guts are a little lower. And then I did Operation Maid Watch that evening.
Hey!
So if we want to jump into Maid Watch, we can. Or do you want to save it?
Let's jump into it when did you do the actual Confidant part of it?
I did that 2 nights later, it looks like. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
well, let's just talk about this. So, yeah, Operation Maid Watch is this thing that we talked about last week, right? Where Mishima and Ryuji are being high school boys and get this maid service thing, and they decide to go to an empty apartment on Ryuji's floor to call a maid to see what they'll do for them, I guess. It's very weirdly it's very fun high school boys being high school boys.
As we said,
in
it was
a weird
super
sort
bad.
of way.
It's very super bad.
Yeah, it's very super bad. Yeah. And they call this maid service, and then as they're waiting for the maid to arrive, Ryuji and Mishima just freak out and are like, we can't do this, and run out into the balcony. And then the maid arrives. I mean, do you just want me to go through this, or should I just
No, you totally can. I am just going to say
Okay.
one of the very important notes I took about this evening was that the apartment is very brightly lit. It's just starkly lit. I know that this is sort of them getting up to sexy shenanigans. It is the most awful setting they could have picked for that.
It's also completely empty.
Yep.
So even if they were gonna Mishima's should we make her clean or cook first? I wonder what she'll do. And it's you guys are in an empty apartment.
Yeah. It may not even have power to the kitchen. What are you talking about?
It's just nuts. It's so funny. And then the maid arrives, and you immediately turn your back to her, and she's like, wait, are you a high schooler? And you can either be yes, I'm in college, or I'm an adult.
Yeah. I'm a man.
Yeah. And no matter what you say, she's just kind of and then she hears Ryuji and Mishima out in the balcony and is like, wait a minute, and then turns around, and of course the big reveal of this moment is that the maid is actually Kawakami, your homeroom teacher, moonlighting as a maid, and she got caught by her own students, basically, is what she thinks.
Yeah.
But then she's also like, wait, why are you guys calling a maid service?
Yeah.
And it's very weird and very awkward. And then I think it's the next day from whenever you do that at school, you see her being grilled by the teacher, the English teacher.
Yeah, right? Because at one point she says she assumes that this other teacher told you about her potentially having a second job, because she'll leave school earlier, right at the second she can. She doesn't really hang around for things. She's obviously kind of going places, and so she knows that this other teacher is suspicious of her. And then
gossipy.
The next day. Yep, yeah, and then the next day you can see them talking, and you can choose to help her out during the conversation.
Right. You go up and basically are like, thank you for helping me after hours.
Yes.
And she's like, oh yes, of course.
Yeah.
It's
there's a second part to it we'll get in a couple of days, I guess, since it's for my confidant. But yeah, it's the scene is presented, I think, as a very as we were saying, high schoolers getting into trouble that's a little bit too R-rated for them.
Sure.
And being out of their depth. And I think the fact that Mishima and Ryuji run away is a very telling moment of just oh yeah, these are just high school boy idiots.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. And then when they're confronted with the real possibility of it, it's what are you going to do? Run away.
I think probably let's just keep talking about this just
we
real
can.
quick.
That
just
works for me.
Keep it contained.
Yeah.
Because she then gives you her number, right? And is don't call me from your cell phone, but request me and we can talk about this.
Yeah. Because she leaves the first session basically being just pleading with you not to tell her, she'll be in big trouble.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so you can then, once you have level 3, I believe it's level 3 guts.
Yes.
You can go to the payphone in LeBlanc and call, or the public phone in LeBlanc, and call this maid service and request her Becky as she goes by in that. And she'll come to your house, and that's when you actually get her as a confidant.
Yeah.
And this confidant line is probably the most notorious in the entire game, but also, and this is the conflict of it, is like less so in Royal because you have a lot more evenings
That's
where
true.
you can just like do things in LeBlanc, but like
Yeah.
it is one of the most valuable generally because it allows you to get little extra moments of time to spend here and there where you otherwise wouldn't. And time is money in this
Yep.
game, right?
Yeah.
It is the most valuable resource there is.
And
So
yeah.
it's like, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it was so immensely like that was one of the first things I was told about when playing Persona 5 originally was like, okay, when you're going for Confidants, go for the Kawakami one because it is so useful to your time. And I could imagine it being less so in Royal as you're saying, but yeah, it's just one of those things where like she even says like, I'll let you ditch class if you help
Right.
keep my secret at the end of that first Confidant meeting. And yeah, so it is one of those give and takes of like, the story has the potential to go to very unacceptable, like very gross places, because it can be a romance option.
Right. And so here's the thing that I was surprised about, because I think that there is a ton of really valid criticism to levy at this, in that the fact that your teacher is a maid and is coming and cleaning your apartment while making cutesy maid noises, and then, like, eventually you can date her is, like, incredibly disgusting and weird.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and this is not me apologizing for that,
Sure.
what I was surprised to see this playthrough, because I remember that so clearly, what I didn't remember is that this Confidant line actually doesn't start out that gross. Like, it is very intentionally gross, as we said, like super bad kids getting into trouble calling a like prostitute sort of thing, like hey. Like, it's that sort of gross, and it definitely does that, I think, intentionally. But like, what I was kind of surprised about at the beginning of this Confidant line was like, early on, this is kind of just like a nice story that has a bunch of uncomfortable dialogue options that are jokes, right?
Yeah.
Like Kawakami is like very clearly distressed and overworked and like doesn't have anybody to talk to about this, and like is really low on money, and like you kind of find her out, but then also are like, you know what, like I'll help you out, like if you don't like rat me out, and like you make this really uneasy bargain. But at the same time, like, I don't know, it doesn't, like, she's very clear in the dialogue, because I've done the first Confidant level up too.
I
Like,
did
she's
too,
very
so we
clear.
can talk about that. Yeah.
Oh,
I
good,
did that
yeah.
the next night just because I know how valuable this Confidant is, so I used that
Yeah.
opportunity to go in. But yeah, it's like the first night where the Confidant happened, she's like, it would help me out if you're able to call me because I'm kind of considered like over the hill for what this
Right.
like, part of my work. Like, I don't really get many calls, and so I'm not doing that well at this, but I need the money. And it's one of those things where it's like, she is a teacher who I agree with you, like rewatching the origins of the story. Like I definitely agree, like where it can go and where the game allows it to go is gross and unacceptable in that way. But at least at the beginning, it's like, here is someone who is involved in, I guess, some field or branch of, and forgive me because I do not know the industries well enough to say how this properly relates, but like some form of what could be considered like sex worker.
Right.
And obviously that is something that is probably frowned upon in this society at this time, and especially for a teacher to be doing that outside of their normal hours. Like, that is something that they would be judged for when they are trying to make a living, to be able to, as we learn in the next session, at least, they're saying their sister is sick and they need money. Someone even calls about a payment transfer, and it sounds like it's really rough. She asks for 100,000 yen, basically.
Right. She's clearly in trouble.
Yeah, like she's very clearly in trouble, and it's this balance of, she is just honestly trying to, find a footing in her life to have some sort of stability for whatever problem she has going on. But she also has this juxtaposition of being considered old for what she's doing. And so she's not as popular with clients and is in a bit of a tough spot. And you happened to, by chance, be the one to call her that time as kids making a goofy mistake, which isn't, I think, out of character for what high school boys would do.
No, yeah. And like, but crucially to me too, like in this first kind of Confidant level up moment, like scene, she's like don't get any ideas,
Yes,
right? Like
yeah.
very clearly is like do not misunderstand what this is. Do not get any weird ideas, okay?
Yeah.
Nothing is happening here. And the dialogue option in response that she likes is you being like, of course not.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the thing I think that's interesting, this like kind of dichotomy in the scenes is like this is like actually genuinely, if there weren't these like jokey answers where you could be like, you're hot, or like, and if she wasn't like calling you master all the time really uncomfortably, like it would just kind of be like an interesting story, right? Yeah. And that's I think what I didn't remember as much from my other playthroughs is like the fact, like, there's a lot of gross stuff in this that is very gross and shouldn't, like, makes me uncomfortable, but at the same time, like, I don't think that I think it only gets really weird if you make it weird, right?
Yeah.
And, like,
though it is
a lot of the... Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, but to be fair, the game lets you make it weird.
Totally.
Also.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you're not saying, yeah, but you know, like I know you're very much in the same mindset of like it shouldn't like that is a fundamental problem. It just shouldn't let it.
Yeah,
get to that point.
You should not be able to date your teacher.
Yes,
that is the thing that should not be able to happen in this game.
Yeah,
but. Yeah, you're totally right. It letting you make it weird is weird, but the fact that like I don't know, I was a little surprised by how much I actually was enjoying the story and like reading it in a different light this time around.
Me too. Like
being like,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say like there is very clearly an impulse to want to tell a like empathetic story about her in this position and having to deal with like what's going on in her wider life and everything. And yeah, it's like I am with you that I didn't remember any of that. I just remembered, oh yeah, it was this weird storyline where eventually you can choose to romance your teacher, which is gross.
Right.
And but there is the impulse of like a more interesting character-based story, and I just wish the game didn't let it go the other route or like have the potential to go the other route. And you know,
sure,
we're at that point where it's too late for this game to have changed. Hopefully things can be a little different in whatever comes next for Persona, but yeah, it's
well, and it's so weird too that it does let you do like it's so unbelievably odd to me that this game will acknowledge how gross that is.
Yes.
Frequently. Like, itself will say, this is weird and bad, don't do this, what do you, like, this is, stop it, and then it just lets you do it. And it's like, God, like, that kind of undercuts all the other stuff you were saying if you're gonna also allow this to happen. Like,
yeah, for sure.
I don't know. It's very different to me than, like, you know, Mass Effect or The Witcher, where you can do like evil options or like bad options, because it's like, well, that's still in the context of something that character would do, right? Whereas this feels very out of character for everyone involved to allow it to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's where that distinction comes to me, is it just feels like the high school kids of like, hee, what if this is all jokey, and then somebody was like, wait, but what if? You know, and got like a little too serious. And it's like, that's suddenly where it stops being funny.
Yep, yeah. But I agree with you in the sense that, yeah, there's very much like, I forgot sort of the origins of where this story comes from, other than the goofy Superbad-esque scene, but it is very much like, there is a worthwhile like character development story going on with Kawakami that I want to continue this Confidant line, because I don't remember every bit of like her personal background and things that happen there, and I do want to understand that and see if we're able to help her in our position, because especially we seem to be a high schooler who gets hundreds of thousands of yen, no problem. So, you know, maybe we can be helpful. But yeah, it's suffice to say, we will not be choosing the gross romance options on this show. But
I mean, you do you, I guess, because it's your RPG, but like, I don't know. Like, this is the one thing that everyone always calls back to about Persona 5 being really gross, is that you can date adults as a high schooler, and the adults are varying levels of like apprehensive, but doing it anyway to like way too into it, right? Like, and that's just like doesn't need to be like, there's like 8 like high school romance options anyway, so like, I don't know. It just it's very, all that stuff is very gross, and we'll get into it more as it comes up, but I was surprised to to read this story, or at least the origins of this story, in a light I had not remembered necessarily, because I was too busy kind of like remembering the problematic parts of it.
Totally. Yeah. There's definitely some worthwhile stuff to discuss, and as we get a little bit more into all the confidants, I think we'll figure out a way to discuss all of these and the good, the bad, and the unnecessary of them all that is there. But so that was my first evening, was continuing that story, and then moving on to June 8th, just to get back to our free time. I hung out with Maruki finally.
Hooray!
I did the thing I should have been doing all this time, and it was...
You did the thing!
He was nice, and it was fun, and he was a reasonable counselor. As someone who had seen a few in high school, he was not a bad one. I'll give him that. He's trying to be a good guy. And then I watched the zombie movie, because I was not gutsy enough to call Kawakami that night.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah. What about you? What did you do on the 8th?
On the 8th, I leveled Kasumi.
Okay.
And get on that, too.
Yeah. I saw her as an option, but Maruki was also an option. I was like, I said I would go hang out with Maruki. Let me go hang out with Maruki.
I think you chose right, because Maruki has more levels than her, right? She only goes up to 5, so it's you want to also try to max her out if you can by the end of the game. But I guess I'll mention this really quick, because we're also going to talk about another character. I'll mention this when we get to it.
Okay.
Let's keep going. So I leveled Kasumi. Sorry about that. And then I also made curry that night.
Okay.
Because I had gotten Sojiro to 4, so I was like, why don't I make curry? And so, yeah.
Good call. And then we move on to June 9th, which is the first part. I forgot it was a 2-day trip to the social studies TV station, which, like, I don't feel like any school I went to would have paid for 2 days of a single trip. That seems like an unnecessary expense.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a two-part trip to a TV station for your social studies trip. And obviously everyone is varying degrees of excited or interested in what's going on. I think is this the day or is it the next day where you can, basically, like, they're talking about things and you can kind of reply like, oh, I already knew that. Like, oh, obviously that's
the first day.
Like Ryuji's like, why, like X, Y, and Z, why do they do this? And you're like, oh, obviously it's this, you idiot. Or you can, be nice to him. I tried to be nice because Ryuji is a good boy.
And the TV station person is telling you just, like, the most obvious things, where they're like, the footage is then edited down in a room called the editing room.
Sometimes the show stops, but it doesn't actually stop. Those are commercials. It feels like Perd Hapley from Parks and Rec having to explain his job, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
But so anyway, essentially, as a social studies trip, you're all corralled into doing some free labor. Specifically the boys, who basically are forced to do manual labor for this trip, while On gets off a little bit easier because forgive me if I'm wrong, but the TV station man is really creepy and gross, and it's like, oh, you're pretty, we should have you involved. Yeah,
there's like an AD who's like super gross.
Yeah, which entertainment industry, kind of, with all the stories we hear, not that surprising of a caricature to build up.
And also, again, another moment where this game knowingly says, here's an adult hitting on a high schooler and it's weird. Yeah. Right? It's not like it doesn't do that.
No, yeah.
Ever.
It knows both. It's almost like there was, like, the adult in the room and then, like, a horny teenager in the room. And both of them got to make the same calls.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so that all happens, and the day kind of ends. It's kind of a boring part of the trip. And then the team is tired after, and they're debating of what to do. Morgana wants to go to the place that is a huge pancake-looking place. Ryuji clarifies that it's Dome Town, which I accidentally auto-corrected to Duntown.
I thought it was going to be Dorntown.
You would think my phone would know that by now, that Dorn puns are the way to go, but no, sadly not.
So, really quickly,
yeah.
Do you have some sort of context for what, or can a viewer provide a little context for what Dometown is to me? Because I don't fully understand if it's like what we would in the States consider like a boardwalk where it has roller coasters in places and you can just hang out, or if it's more like an actual theme park. Like, because it's got like roller coasters, but it's also got like restaurants and food places, and I like just don't know where that line kind of ends between like boardwalk and actual theme park.
It is an entertainment complex, is how it's described on this Persona wiki that I am reading. It seems like
maybe it's like a Midwest American mall, because those have like roller coasters in them sometimes.
That or the Santa Monica Pier. In LA, where it's you would go to the pier to hang out, but there's also a Ferris wheel and maybe like a wheel and another ride or two.
Okay.
I don't feel like it's a full amusement park, but
right.
It did feel like there are rides, but it's sort of like, oh yeah, this is just kind of like a hangout day. This is where you would go for that sort of entertainment.
Cool.
But no, I had that same thought of like, are they just like debating to go to an amusement park for the day?
Yeah.
Anyway, so they're all talking about this. An mentions they have cool rides as well. Morgana wants to prove he's brave, but An says it's not really that courageous to go on the rides. But they're all excited for the roller coasters, and as they're talking about all of this, someone walks by who we've met before, known as the Pleasant Boy.
Pleasant Boy!
He was passing by and realized that they'll be filming together for tomorrow. His name is Goro Akechi. And he asks if they're going to have cake. Everyone's a bit confused by that. He said he thought he heard someone talking about pancakes, but they're all going to Dometown, obviously. Again, my phone auto-corrected. Going to some town. But so anyway, they have this little interaction. They're like, well, guess we'll talk to you more tomorrow. Obviously, we've seen this boy once or twice before. And then you kind of just go home for the day.
Yeah, and Akechi obviously becomes more of a character as we see literally tomorrow, but this is another one of those moments where it's like, why is this a 2-day thing?
Yeah.
Like, Akechi came to the studio both days? Like,
yeah, really?
Okay.
He seemed pretty in demand from what we learned of him, but yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So anyway, the next day, I called Kawakami that night. What did you end up doing the night of the night?
I think I played darts that night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So anyway, we then go to June 10th. Where we're at the second part of the TV station trip. I wrote down Akechi, all the girls love him. Because there's just a bunch of fawning over Akechi, which, like, man, the idea of, like, I guess there's influencers and stuff now, and, like, I guess he is somewhat of, like, a detective influencer is, I guess, the best way to kind of, like, put him in a bucket that's related to other people, but yeah. Anyway, he is being interviewed on this TV station. They're all there in the crowd, and they're talking about the Phantom Thieves, because Akechi is someone who helps the law and is like this incredible detective for a boy his age. And he basically calls the Phantom Thieves criminals on television.
Hooray!
How dare he?
Yeah.
But he specifically says, because they're like, what do you think about them existing? And he's like, I hope they exist so they can be tried in court for the criminals they are. Like, it's very well done sort of turn, because it's like, oh, he's on our side. No, he hates you.
Yeah, and Akechi is this, like, very sort of, like, well-spoken, like, very polite, right, high school boy who's also this renowned detective already.
Yeah.
And he's a very funny character, especially early on, because he's super smart, clearly, but he's also, like he's very, he has ideas, right? And he is... Like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like, he expresses them very, like...
Eloquently?
Like, they're just the facts, right?
Yes.
Like, I don't know. He's very, resolute, I guess is a good word for it.
Yes.
In his stances and his thoughts.
Absolutely. He is very, the like matter-of-fact way he speaks about things as if they are just the accepted fact is very impressive for a kid his age, but I think that's very intentional, and props to Robbie Damon, who's his voice actor, who does a very good job.
I love Akechi.
Akechi is...
I'm glad we finally met him.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of fun to talk about Akechi as we go on, but even though he's being antagonistic, and they kind of get some thoughts from the crowd, including yourself, about what you think of the Phantom Thieves, that draws Akechi's eye even further, and he becomes a confidant for you here.
Hooray!
And so he basically wants to be able to, like, talk to you about these things, because he was taken by your approach to discussing the Phantom Thieves.
Yeah, because he's like, because he was they asked you questions right in the audience, and you were basically like, the Phantom Thieves are great, and he was like, but what if they aren't? And you were like, nah, they are. And he's like, very interesting, let us discuss this more. And like, that's basically how that goes.
Yes, you have eloquently put the idea that you love them and I hate them.
This Confidant is also, we should note, is different in Royal, right? I guess you're not, you haven't, this is your first time at this point, right?
Yes, yeah, this is my first time here.
So in Royal, or in the base game, Akechi's Confidant was on rails, entirely decided by story events. Occasionally you would just like run into Akechi and then it would be like, good job, level up, and that was like, it was very weird.
Yeah.
But that's fine. This time around, Akechi is an actual Confidant where you actually go hang out with him and have these tailored moments and stories with him to get his Confidant level up, which is really cool. And what I was going to say earlier, which I will say now, without spoilers, I already mentioned that if you want to get the extra Royal content, you should level Maruki to max. Level Maruki. Additionally, I will say, I'm not going to go into full detail with this, but if anybody is curious, there's a little bit, like, there's some extra stuff in the end, what a lot of people call, like, the quote-unquote true ending, but I think that's going a little far, maybe. You can leave it to yourself. But that also has a couple requirements that involve leveling Kasumi and leveling Akechi, so just... if you want to look into that a little more, I'd say go look into that a little more, but also we could provide a little more detail if people are more interested in that. It's a little bit more involved, though, but I would say the basics of it is Maruki, Kasumi, and Akechi are all important people to be leveling their Confidants. Maruki top of the list. Cool. That's kind of how I'd put it.
Good to know. I definitely want to go for all of them, especially just because it is it's new Confidants that I didn't have in the first game, and I like... Yeah. There are some I just don't really care as much about for a second go around. So like if I need to make that choice, I will go for them. But yeah, I did see Akechi on the map one night and was like, whoa, that shouldn't be. I shouldn't know where he is.
Yeah, that's the other good thing is that they're all the Confidants that you should do, and they're also all the Confidants that are new and exciting.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's good.
Anyway, you also have a free evening that night, and that was the night I leveled up Kawakami by 1.
That night, I think I also leveled up Kawakami, yeah.
Cool. Moving on to June 11th, then, the survey on the fan side has changed to, are the Phantom Thieves just?
Yeah, everyone's real mad. I guess we didn't talk about that. We don't.
I was going to talk about that this day, because there is a lot of that, but yeah, you're correct. Yeah, the group is pissed.
Everyone's super mad at Akechi calling them criminals, including Mishima, who texts you very angrily and says he's going to change the poll. And so now it's, are the Phantom Thieves just? And it goes up ever so slightly.
Just a little bit, which, we need that constant positive reinforcement. But yeah, the next day you get a little bit more of an insight now that he's done this all on television. Ryuji, I think, above all, is just completely upset about it, and is talking very angrily and very animatedly about all of this stuff, talking about the palaces and all that. And as you are, Makoto takes a photo of all of you and criticizes you all. They call her out, and she sort of walks away a little bit and has this internal moment of like struggling that will continue to see. Yes.
Can we just really quickly address how good, like, An is so good at being a mean girl. like she has a couple moments, it's really infrequent, but she has a couple moments where she like flips this switch from being like nice to just being a total mean girl, and it's like she is like surgical in her taking down of Makoto. She like eviscerates her self-esteem in moments. It's nuts.
Yeah, she cuts to the core of her real quick and gives Makoto this very introspective like struggle that we'll see develop over the next couple days as well. Following up on the conversations with the principal earlier today, earlier this week, excuse me. But it's definitely, you're right. She's real tough when she needs to be. On the main group that you're with, like I do have, I think, the most fondness for them just because it is the group you spend the most time with. And on Ryuji and Yusuke are really all well drawn out. And speaking of, Yusuke has announced that he is moving out of the dorms to move in with you.
Well, to move it with on.
Excuse me, yes, on it first, and then is like...
Without telling her.
Yeah. Which, very Yusuke thing to do. But eventually they're like, this can't work. And so they're like, oh, well, maybe he can stay with you. And
Hooray.
The best way to make that happen, though, is you need to get Sojiro's approval first, because it's kind of his shop. So, on being so taken aback about all of that, you eventually get to the point where he's going to stay with you. But we all have to go convince Sojiro. And so the group heads over to the cafe, and he's shocked to see all these kids, hanging out with Joker. It's like, oh, friends? What? And especially a girl is a big gasp moment for him. And so they all are getting a little bit of an introduction there on the main floor with Sojiro. Ryuji hates coffee and has no manners and is just like, oh, what is this trash? But Sojiro, in the classiest way, is just like, oh yeah, I didn't really like coffee that much when I was your age.
I feel like it is so wonderfully on brand for Ryuji to be the one, like, immature kid who's like, like, at the coffee.
Yeah.
Which... full disclosure, is also me with coffee. I really dislike coffee, but
I hated it as a kid, so like I totally get it. It's just very funny that he, like, in this coffee shop for the man who's making it, he's like, get it away from me. But yeah, it
Yusuke and An are a little more cultured. They're like, oh, this is so delicate and nice, and Ryuji's like, no.
Yeah, they're like, oh, the floral notes that have come from the hills of Latin America where these beans originated, and he's like, gross brown water. Ugh. But yeah, they're all very polite about it. Ryuji hates it, but then they want to go see his room. Sojiro stops on for a moment and is just like, to get more of a sense of her. It's one of those weird things where, like, so far we've been introduced to Sojiro as a guy who's like, I don't let anyone but girls in my car. Like, having a guy, like, so for a moment I had a little, like, even though I know where the story goes, for a moment I had the moment of like, oh no, is Sojiro going to be a creepy adult? But he's not.
Yeah. It's at this point in the story, it is left a little bit ambiguous.
Yes.
I would say.
Yeah.
But I would also say, if you're playing this game for the first time and that moment seemed gross to you, it kind of becomes clear why it's not later on, and we just don't have to get into that.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, that all happens. An grabs the bag with Morgana because they forgot it, and they go up to Joker's room to take in the wonderful attic that he lives in, and where now Yusuke, of course, may be getting to live as well. And they decide, it's time for a little bit of a celebration, so it's time for Hot Pot.
Hot Pot!
And as this is going on, it's a very fun montage of, again, getting to know these characters a bit more, getting to advance their personal stories a little bit more, but also getting to moments that really solidify, like, their friendships and their, their bonds with each other. An does at this point ask Sojiro during the whole Hot Pot scenario if Yusuke can stay. I think it happens off screen, correct? And then she's like,
I believe so.
She's like, oh, I asked because I figured you wouldn't be able to. And so I just did it for you. And so he's basically allowed to stay, and it's okay. And we see them getting all excited. But before we get to, like, the actual enjoyment of their hot pot, we do get a quick cutaway to Sai and Makoto having a very boring, very quiet dinner while the Akechi TV moment replays on television.
And I think this is the first time we see those two as, like, fully understanding that they are related and living together that way.
Yes, yeah.
And Sai is kind of, like, hella harsh on Makoto.
Yeah.
Basically being like, you don't have to worry about any of that Phantom Thieves stuff. Focus on your studies. The world is hard. And it's like, oh, man.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Makoto is very worried about Sai and, like, how overworked she is and making sure that she feels stable. And so Makoto continues to have this, like, crisis of faith, basically, about, like, what's expected of her, what she expects of herself, just all the things. Probably a teenager who is trying to appease all of the adults in their life, but then not making friends with their classmates would be going through on a mental level. Not that I would know anything about that whatsoever. But so anyway, she's going all through. I relate to Makoto a lot. Anyway, we go back to the team, and they're having this just, like, grand old time, having a wonderful hot pot together. They have their wonderfully branded nice soda that they're having.
Nice.
And Morgana starts talking about An as a wife, like the weirdo that Morgana can be. An falls asleep, and I think Ryuji and Morgana try to look up her skirt.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, that's real messed up of them.
And she kind of just like bats them away like flies. It's very like
it's a very odd. It's like, oh yeah, An can take care of her shit. Like An is very much like knows how to handle herself, but it's like, yeah, you guys didn't need to be gross like that.
No.
That was completely unnecessary in that moment, unfortunately. But as she falls asleep and just kind of like knocks out instantly, the guys have a discussion kind of about themselves and a little bit about their lives. Ryuji talks a bit about his home life, which obviously if you've been playing his Confidant line, you'll have a little bit of insight into as well. But this is a chance for it to kind of get stated to everyone, no matter how much you've been hanging out with Ryuji, and to get more insight into his parents and just his life in general. And we also get a flashback to Joker's big moment, talking a little bit more about his history and the moment.
A little more detail on that.
Yeah, we get detail here where essentially he went to intercept this woman who's being harassed and assaulted by this man who's trying to force her into his car. And Joker stops this moment, and does he hit the guy?
Not in this flashback moment. Because what actually happens, or what's shown before, is that he like gets in the way and the dude is drunk and like falls over.
Okay. No, I legitimately do not remember all the details that come after this. It's been long
He
enough.
puts hands on him, but he does not like hit him or anything.
I just know he had an injury on him enough to like look like he was. Yeah. And so he basically is telling the woman to lie for him and say that Joker attacked him. That it was just him coming out of nowhere and attacking him, and that he'll, ruin her life otherwise, but, in the process is destroying Joker's life. And so the cops arrive, they recognize this man, and the woman unfortunately lies. And that is, of course, how Joker ended up where he is. What did you think about this, the way they're doling out the information of Joker's sort of history and all that?
It's nice to get a little more info on that part, right? Like at this point, because you're just getting a little bit at a time. Also, at this point, it basically is used to reconfirm that you've seen this character elsewhere before, right? Because the way that they're like doing these flashbacks and then like showing other little bits and teasing here and there. So I think that's mostly what this is for, is like giving you less intel on Joker and more intel on the other guy, basically. Yeah. Oh, I can't hear you anymore.
Flashing back from this to the present, I pressed the button because I needed to type to look something up. We get back to the moment, the hot pot moment. They're talking about things a little bit. The group obviously feels awful about this. One interesting thing is, of course, Morgana can't remember their life.
Right.
And is frustrated by that fact that they're all being able to reminisce and Morgana can't. An does eventually wake up at this point and says like feels like she's known everyone for forever, but can't explain why. And Morgana, in particular, feels like they really knows Morgana, but can't put it into words.
And Ryuji's not a jerk to Morgana. Ryuji's like, nah, you fit in. And it's like, aw.
We're all misfits here.
Yeah.
It's a very sweet moment, despite their contentious relationship otherwise. An eventually leaves, though, and the guys go to hang out at the bathhouse. Ryuji tries to ask you about An, as a girl. Because at first you're like, yeah, she's a nice person. He's like, no, man, but I mean, like, isn't she pretty? Like, that's basically what Ryuji is getting at. And, like, this... It is a gross moment, but I do not think uncharacteristic of teenage boys to talk about this when the only female friend they have is here.
I don't think that moment. I think like the looking up the skirt thing is gross. I don't think this moment is as gross at all. I think it's just like him being a boy, and it's funny because then you're given in a moment to like do that, like, or to like say what you would say, and then also Yusuke is given a moment to reconfirm that he's like totally not thinking about her that way, right?
It's like, great, I will be sure to tell her about these things you have said. And it's like, oh, but yeah, it feels very characteristic of teenage boys at this point.
Sure. Sure.
The other moment before it, less so and much more gross. But yeah, this moment feels very much like just these idiot boys not knowing how to like properly discuss these things. But yeah, you get the option to say how you feel about her in either way, and either basically implicate both you and Ryuji about talking that you think An is attractive, or just basically implicate Ryuji, and you can just say you think An is a nice person.
Sure.
But yeah, anyway, after that, there's a trip to the Velvet Room that evening. Igor increases your persona stock that evening.
Hooray!
Which is always important and necessary.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a much more like story-based day. Things are a little bit more focused there.
Yeah.
Moving on from there, unless there's anything from that day that I'm forgetting that you wanted to address.
No, I just really liked this day. I like that they have a moment where they all just kind of like show that they are close to each other. And I also think it's nice that Yusuke is like, you literally know every bit about my life I would like to know about you now.
Yeah.
I think that's good that he does that.
Yeah. And a little bit more on Yusuke in just a second, but before then we get a scene the next morning of Makoto and Akechi having a strange conversation. I agree with you. I couldn't figure out where this was supposed to be.
It's so weird because it's on a Sunday,
yeah,
and everyone is in a school uniform, so I think it's at Akechi's school because it looked like they kind of matched his uniform. But then Makoto is there, and there's no explanation given for why she's there, and there's no explanation for why anybody would be at school on a Sunday. So, like, it's just Makoto and Akechi, like, having a conversation somewhere for some reason.
Yeah, it's very oddly placed in the story here, and it might have just been, like, an editing moment that wasn't caught, like a continuity thing that wasn't caught in the game.
Sure.
But it's a weird one, but they have this conversation about finding the Phantom Thieves. He assumes they must exist to be able to find info about them. Like he wants to, it's sort of the implication is like if he wants to find info about them, that must mean he assumes they are real.
Right.
And so they have this a little bit of a philosophical debate about them, but he also he talks about them being rivals to him. And then he's also kind of an ass to Makoto because he calls her the too good girl type of pushover.
Yeah, he's like, he cuts her to the, like, she's just getting, like, she even has a moment after this conversation where she's just like, why is everyone getting on my case? It's like, everyone is just tearing into Makoto right now.
Yeah, and like, of course, and again, it's that thing of the game doing that thing where at first we were presented of Makoto just being this, like, basically extension of the adults, like the authoritarian adults, and trying to have it out for the kids, and she almost like, despite being of the same age of them and despite being classmates, was kind of like divorced from any sort of concept that they were equals and was very much like, I'm the one keeping everyone in line. But we're beginning to see more of that's not really the full Makoto. And then we get back to the cafe where Yusuke is having coffee and has decided to go back to the dorms after one night. Because he wants to find people and experiences to paint, and worries that if he goes away from those things, he won't get the inspiration to get sort of over artist block that he needs.
Right.
But he does decide to leave behind the Sayuri as a fixture for the cafe. Which...
So just to mark the scoreboard, I love that the Sayuri ends up in LeBlanc, but just to mark the scoreboard, we've now saved Yusuke from a terrible fate. Mm-hmm. He has fought with terrible monsters with us. He has lived in our house. Mm-hmm. The painting, the only copy of the original painting that his dead mother has made is now in our cafe. Mm-hmm. And Akechi is a confidant before him.
Yep. Yeah. It's very funny how the order in which that happens. Yeah.
He's still not a confidant.
We have been through so much with this guy, and he's...
I went and played darts with him, and then at the end of the darts thing, everyone got a little music note, except him, because he still wasn't a confidant.
It's so fun. It's a very odd timing for him. But, yeah. Anyway... so he decides to leave it there and goes off to back to the dorms. You wake up for your sort of standard Sunday. I don't know if this was just me, but you can't buy anything on the TV today, can you?
Yeah, it's 2 weeks in a row. There's no shopping channel.
Yeah, it's they're just discussing basically a mafia group on TV at the moment.
Yeah.
And so that's the only thing going on there. You can go, though, to the underground walkway to get some juice for your beauty, and level up that.
Wait, what did you get?
Charm, isn't it?
Oh, I got proficiency.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
maybe like the last one always, because I think last week was charm for me. So maybe if you like miss it, it always stays until you buy it.
Yeah, mine was they were like juice to make you more beautiful. It was like collagen or whatever to make me try.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Interesting.
That's good to know. Well, we'll have different juices each week then. Anyway, I then went to Mementos this day, and then made coffee to get my charm to 3 that evening. I actually did this day and then redid the save to make sure we did Mementos because you can't do it on Monday. So I originally hung out with Takemi and Yoshida, but then I didn't get to do that in the current save that I'm in. We are also, though, running a little long on time, though, so I don't know if we want to hold Mementos for...
Yeah, we can talk about Mementos another time. We'll have plenty of time to talk about Mementos once we get into the next sort of, like, block of free time.
For sure. But yeah, so that's what I did on my Sunday. What did you do?
I leveled up On, and
Nice.
I'd just like to brag a little bit, because I don't use a guide for, like, the Confidant things. This On interaction, which I think was level 4, is just, like, bonkers. I got 17... music notes with her.
Oh, wow.
Like, literally, I got 5 different triples and then got the 2 at the end, and it was like, I don't think I've ever gotten that many music notes on a single thing.
Yeah.
Ever. Like,
You
and
should
again,
be
I
set
don't use a
for a
guide,
while.
so. Yeah, just like, it'll be fine. So I leveled up On, and then I also leveled up Yoshida that night, and that plot is getting a little bit more, it's moving along, but that plot is very funny and slowish.
Yeah, I do need to get back to that one. But anyway, Sunday then goes on, and then we get to Monday, the final day of this week, and you see Akechi at the train station in the morning. He basically asks to want to talk to you more, sort of a reminder that he is interested in hearing your thoughts about the Phantom Thieves and things of that nature.
Also, I don't know if you got this moment, but during that, Yusuke is just like in the background waiting for a train for me.
Oh,
and you just don't talk to him or acknowledge
I
it.
think I missed that. No, I don't. He might have been there, but I just totally missed it. That's very funny. But I mean, yeah, that's kind of Yusuke's thing.
It's on brand.
Anyway, as you're going to school, you hear about a weirdo in Kichijoji, who's out there that you could investigate if you would like to, perhaps. And
You should.
And then you get a quiz in school, basically about it's your hair turning to copper color.
Yeah, what happens if you wash your hair with copper? What color does it turn?
Oh, okay, that's what. And it turns.
I think they said green.
Yes,
They might have said like turquoise. I don't remember.
I believe it's green.
Okay.
Anyway, then we get this vignette after class, and excuse me, Makoto calls you in after class, and Kawakami is basically telling you to, and she's like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but
Kawakami's grumpiness is so great.
Is wonderful. Yeah, it's such a great characteristic of her. But she's like, yeah,
And also gets more layers when you realize she's moonlighting because she's in money trouble.
Yep. Yeah. It's very good. Anyway, she calls you in and basically asks you directly for an answer to why you've been changing hearts in these 2 cases, because she has audio of Ryuji saying they're the thieves.
Yeah.
And she wants you to confess or she'll bring in the cops. She threatens you. But while the conversation's going on, you answer a call, and it's Ryuji loudly just saying, like, hey, we should meet up soon to discuss Phantom Thieves things anyway.
It's the best call.
It's so
Because you
good.
literally pick it up, Ryuji yells that,
Yeah.
and then just hangs up.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
like, that's the end of the call.
He's just like, hey, we're the Phantom Thieves, bye. And then she's like, okay, well, now I have some more evidence. And you basically have to take her to the group. So you're all meeting, of course, in your famous hideout at the train station. And she basically tells the group, shows them that she has this evidence. And Anne confronts her about like why Makoto feels like doesn't she know she's being used by these adults? Like, doesn't she see through all this? And Makoto's like, yeah, no, I know. I get it. This is, I know this is what's happening. And she wants to meet you because she wants to verify that you're the Phantom Thieves so that you can change someone's heart. And if you do, she'll help try to make this go away. She basically won't show any of this evidence.
She wants to like confirm that you are just, right?
Yes,
she wants to confirm that you are doing this for good, not to like, because then is that really so bad, sort of, is the implication.
Yeah, exactly. And so she's like, if you do, she'll erase the evidence. And so she wants you to change someone's heart. She won't tell you who they are yet, but invites you to have a discussion on the roof the next day, which will be for our next discussion. But then you do get a free evening, and I did hang out with Akechi.
Hooray! Yeah, I went to Kichijoji, and I met the shady man that they were talking about, which, by the way, you should do.
I will. Yes, I absolutely will.
Because you just find him in the alley, and he does basically all he is this mechanic where you can trade him items, and you get really good. Like, he'll ask you to go buy an item from a specific shop, pretty much, and then you just get like a really good item in return. Cool. It's just a useful little thing to check occasionally. Another excuse to go to Kichijoji.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then I leveled Akechi as well, where you go and play billiards with him.
Yes, yeah, and he uses his a different hand than you're expecting, and because he didn't want to make it too embarrassing for you.
He uses his non-dominant hand.
Yes, yeah. And he's like, oh, you noticed that. How perceptive of you. Well, in his classic Akechi way. But yeah, that is a wrap-up of the week itself. We'll have to find out who Makoto wants you to go after and what will unfold from there next week. But yeah, we're into the next chapter, and it's very exciting to be there. Of course, before we wrap up, we have a couple of answers and I'll have an answer, but we'll have questions and answers. That's how words work. Where of course we'll start off with my persona pseudonym.
Real quick.
Yes.
I know we're running long.
No, yeah.
But do we want to do a spoilery thing before or after the quiz stuff?
I was thinking after the quiz, but
okay, we'll do the quiz, and then anybody who doesn't want the spoilers can get the quiz and then just sign off.
Exactly.
And great.
That was my hope.
There you
go. We'll get to that in just a sec, but before we do, persona pseudonym, where I asked Tom to guess the real names of the personas based on the pseudonyms they're given in the game. And one I'm giving you, I don't think I've given you yet. Night Walking Warrior.
Night Walking Warrior?
Yes.
Night Walking Warrior.
They are found in Madarame's palace.
Night walking as in night dash walking?
Yes.
Okay.
Not Knight.
Oh, I think I might know this. It's the McCoy?
Yes.
Yeah!
Nice.
It's the green guy.
You did it. Yeah. Those doofy boys.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoy the way they are kind of animated. But yeah, they're adorable ones. Congratulations to you. But Tom, you have a pop quiz question for us as well.
Yes. So this one is based off of one of the Confidant things with On, one of her leveling things. I gave Ryuji a lot of love, and I do like On a lot too, so I wanted to do that one. So I think it's in like her third Confidant level up. She's talking about modeling and how she used to do a lot of, like, when she got into modeling, and she tells you about the first time she modeled. So the question is, what country was On's first modeling job in? Ooh. And this one is I wanted to go a little less obscure than after last week's Morgana one.
Fair enough. That's good to know. I will say, so I'm totally down to we should do a quick spoiler section. I will say we both actually have to do work in a second. So we can't take too long, but we'll be discussing things more in the future. But yes, let's do a quick little spoiler section. If you have not played Persona 5, the base game at least, and don't want spoilers for the rest of the story, please turn away now. Thank you for listening. Please come back next week. Tom, go ahead.
Okay, I have so much to talk about. I'm so excited to talk about this because Akechi, obviously we have met Akechi, who is the teased double agent from the beginning, right?
Yes. Yeah.
The pancakes moment is legendary, I think, within the Persona 5 world.
Yeah.
And so that moment is really good, but also Akechi is Akechi becomes, like, the reason I wanted to talk about this now, spoiler, when we meet him, is because he is so much cooler in the way he's introduced when you know everything that happens later, to me. Because one of the amazing things about this game is every single, I think, let me double check, excluding Kasumi because she's new, every base game party member, you meet them as an enemy. Yeah. Except for Ryuji, too. Ryuji, because he's the first one. You meet them as a villain or a bad guy who's mean to you in some way, and an adversary in some way, and then they become a good guy. And Akechi is the freaking opposite, and I love that. He's the only character where you meet him, he's friendly to you, and then later he flips. And additionally, there's a lot of really cool stuff that they do with his Confidant moments, where, like, him playing with his left hand in pool is literally what he does to you with his two personas later on, where he's using his non-dominant persona to trick you, and then when you go to then face him, he's like, oh, you thought that was my full power? Nah, and flips it. And that's like, so there's these amazing little parallels in Akechi's story that they make even richer in the Royal stuff, where you're like, oh yeah, this is like when you're first watching it, it just doesn't seem like anything. And then when you watch it a second time and you know where it goes, you're like, oh my god, like, Akechi, like, literally told you this right away. Or like, oh man, this is exactly what happens with him later with this other thing. Like, it's just so cool.
No, we'll have a lot more to talk about when we get to those moments in specific. But yeah, I'm really excited to see the changes to his Confidant path in this game and how that affects, you know, what you learn of him before all that stuff plays out. Because I assume there's more to him if they're going to be putting him as a Confidant that way. So I'm excited to see where all that stuff happens. But yeah, I think his introduction, especially now that you know where it is, it's just so well played, and the pancakes moment is prominent, but it's, I think, what's really clever about the way it's introduced, and I think the reason that for me it was a total surprise, and we'll get to a great story about it later on, but for the reason I didn't think about it at all is because they really smartly bury it. Like,
yeah, they mix it up.
When he's talking to you and first comes to introduce, he doesn't, like, I think we had both said before the show, in both of our minds, this moment is like, he comes up and is like, did someone say pancakes? And like, that's supposed to be the moment. But he mentions it like 3 minutes into the conversation. Like, it's buried beneath all this humdrum discussion. Morgana mentioning pancakes and then him talking to you about cakes is buried after all this, like, oh no, I think the park is like this. Oh, they also have this. Oh, it's courageous to go on this. No, it's not. Oh, hello, we'll be working together. And it goes on. And it's kind of a little bit of a boring scene, but I think intentionally to make you not really think too much about that stuff.
Yeah, they try to bury. I think burying it is the right way to phrase it. They really try to do that, and there's just a lot of really cool. Like, I love how, like, all his duplicitous stuff, especially in the Confidant path, which you'll see more of, because they do a really good job of fleshing out his character kind of more in that those Confidant interactions. Yeah, all his duplicitous stuff early on feels like him being clever, and then when you know that he's actually that, like a villain, it suddenly becomes so much more interesting that like he was doing all those things already. As soon as you meet him, he's already lying to you about pool, totally. Right? Like, right away. From like,
minute one.
Yeah. So I love Akechi as a character. I love his arc. I love the way they've handled it and expanded it in Royal with stuff like these Confidant moments, and I'm really excited to get later on in this game so you can see kind of some of the other stuff that how he comes into play, which I won't spoil here, but like just like some of my favorites, some of my absolute favorite stuff that they add to Royal involves Akechi and is with Akechi, and I'm glad we're talking about this a little bit spoilery, because I think he's such a rich, cool character, and there's so much right away with him that you would not see on a first playthrough, and I didn't see. Although I did catch pancakes. Well, my partner caught pancakes and then was like, wait a minute, and I was like, oh yeah. Okay.
We'll get there, but that is a story for another day. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up there, but thank you for listening and or watching this episode of Take Your Time. But as Morgana would say, we're getting pretty tired, so we should head to bed or to work. as the case is for this week. But thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to write in, be sure to comment on either the YouTube version. You can search for Dornology on YouTube, or you can write into dornology@gmail.com with questions, comments, concerns about the story, whatever they may be. Feel free to write in. But you can also find us both on Twitter. I am at JM Dornbush, and Tom is at Tom R. Marks. But until next week, it's been wonderful talking to you. And as always, when I host, nice to steal you.